Again, good morning, everybody. Look forward to doing the annual 2020 report to landowners. We've accomplished a lot over the last year, and it's really a great opportunity for us to kind of show some of the benefits that the agency provides to the landowners. Normally, we talk about major weather events at this part of the presentation, but we really didn't have any this year. But we did have a major issue, obviously, with COVID-19. Lake Worth Drainage District has continued to provide essential services to the community, and we successfully adjusted operations in response to the COVID-19 threat, particularly with the application of remote technology to continue operations. We mobilized all O&M operations. We never slowed down or stopped doing the work that has been required in the field. Our supervisors and equipment operators were able to work independently and report remotely through the use of technology. The crews worked in smaller groups in order to maintain their social distancing and to minimize any potential safety problems with regard to social distancing. And we provided options for remote participation in public meetings. All the planned projects that we had scheduled remained on schedule and were completed, and there were no delays in regulatory activities. And here's some photographs that you can kind of see that sort of show actions in the field. You can see everybody's wearing their mask, and even in the aquatics boat, they managed to be socially distanced and stay safe. And, you know, we posted daily orders out on a bulletin board in front of the shop using some old technology, but it worked really well. In the office, we did a lot of disinfection work. We did a lot of go-to meetings, Zoom meetings, Microsoft Teams, and really it worked out quite well. And even today, with most of the staff back in the building, we still do the meetings remotely, so we don't have to get together and congregate and risk spread of COVID. We reconfigured to deal with the board meetings during the governor's executive order. The photograph on the bottom left is, I think, our first board meeting under that executive order, where really everybody participated by computer with the exception of just the chairman and a few key staff. With regard to weather, not much to say. It was pretty average, slightly above average in Palm Beach County. We had a total of 71.8 inches, which is about a foot above average, 121% specifically. Another way of looking at it is you look at accumulated rainfall over the year. That green area is normal rainfall accumulation. The yellow or tan area shows below average rainfall. So at the beginning of the year, we experienced fairly dry conditions. So we got about half of normal rain in April and May. Then when the wet season started in late May, early June, we pretty much were on average until October, when the wet season started a month early. And we've been receiving above normal rainfall ever since. And of course, that has reflected in this current stages in Lake Okeechobee. Lake Okeechobee got close to 16.5. Corps of Engineers, in response to that, have been making releases to the estuaries and south into the Everglades to try to pull some of those stages down. We expect that trend will continue, and we're going to be watching it, very carefully, because while the Corps definitely needs to pull stages down in order to protect the Herbert Hoover Dike, we have concerns if it gets too low at the end of the dry season that we, could have issues with water shortage. Under the normal operations, this is a pretty good place to be from a water supply standpoint. We wouldn't expect there'd be much, if any, competition over water supply between the estuary, urban or agricultural users. But the Corps of Engineers has approved a temporary deviation that potentially could allow them to pull the lake down to very low levels, down below 12, 10.5 range. We'll be watching very carefully what actions they take in that regard, and what effect it may have on water users in the lower East Coast. Switching gears a little bit to capital improvements, we did have some major capital work done this year. We replaced a really old culvert crossing on the Hillsborough Canal at the intersection of Hillsborough Canal and our E1W South outfall. You can see in the bottom left the photograph of the culvert that existed. It was decades old and was approaching failure condition. And that's one of our major outfalls for the southwestern part of the district. And we were happy to see get that completed. And hopefully it'll last us a century or another century or so. We made some capital improvements to Control Structure 20. Again, this is the same canal, E1W South. Last year, we had installed the SCADA system on that so we could operate it remotely. But the engineer identified some structural problems, and we were able to go in and remediate those to get the structure back in shape, and again, to hopefully last us another few decades. Control 9, that was the big focus over the last year or so. We had gone out for construction bids for relocation of the structure. This is on Stanley Weaver Canal at Lawrence Road. We received and rejected the bids, however. There was a contractor's cost estimate was $10.5 million. That exceeded the engineer's estimate by over 30%. Given the concern over potential revenues associated with the COVID pandemic, we looked at options to reevaluate and remediate and upgrade the existing structure to extend its useful life as an option to relocation. And so in 2021, we intend to move forward with upgrades to the existing structure at an estimated cost of around $1.3 million. Of course, structure maintenance is an ongoing part of what we do. We regularly service and maintain 10 major water control structures. We're continually monitoring the health of that system and those components to ensure they can operate for both water supply and flood control. And we instituted over the last few years a series of preventive maintenance protocols, and we completed about 120 of those over the last year, and we perform unscheduled maintenance as needed. This photograph is an example of that. We had a discarded feed bag wrapped up in the bearings of the pump. We had to take the roof off the structure, pull the pump out, and clean it up, but that's business as usual in Palm Beach County ag areas. One of our biggest programs has been the Canal Rehabilitation Program. If you remember, we identified about 180 miles of canal that were impacted by extensive vegetation growth, mainly on the low maintenance side of the canals. And over the last 5 years, we've been hitting that really hard. You can see the progress made to date. We had 128 miles completed since October 2015. That was broken down we did about 69, 70 miles. We had contractors do a little over 50 miles, and developers and other initiatives got another 5 to 6 miles. We're almost done. We figure we have one more year remaining. We have about 53 miles remaining, and we expect the completion of tree clearing this year, excluding 10 miles that has right-of-way ownership restrictions. And in the past 12 months, we completed 30 miles. And I just want to point out, in 2015, when we were bringing this to the board, we were hoping we could get over 7 miles a year. They've consistently done 20 to 30 miles a year. So it's a testament to the folks that are out there and all the staff here doing the work required to move that project forward. It's not just a field operation. It requires coordination of district-wide staff, requiring participation by everyone. We have surveyors that research and map right-of-way. They did about 87 miles of canal this year. We go out and photograph extensively each project, and we use a GoPro 360-degree video camera. You can see it mounted on top of the truck right there, and that allows us to have a complete view and a historical record of the condition of the canal before and after the work is done. Then we have to field stake the canal right of way, so we know where the line is, as well as adjacent property owners. We certainly don't want to be damaging private property, and so it's important that we take those surveys and field stake the work so we can stay clear of impacting adjacent property owners. We prepared and distributed more than 1,400 notification letters that were delivered either by hand or by mail. We fielded about 730 project-specific public inquiries through emails, telephone calls, visits here in the lobby. We hosted 7 project-specific public outreach meetings with residents and neighborhood associations, and we continually update the information and the project status on our website. And if you haven't been to it, literally every piece of information that we pull together in support of these projects is available on the website for the public. And now I'm just going to quickly go through some before and after perspectives of the work that's done. Here's an example, L42 Jog Road to Military. It's in the Broken Sound area. This project was about 1.25 miles long. You can see before, although it was very well maintained, all that vegetation that you see on the upper left photograph is on district right-of-way. Afterwards, you can see what's basically off of our just off our right-of-way is the privacy wall of the development. And a similar situation on the 2 photographs in the on the bottom. L45 from 95th to west of Lyons Road. Again, you can see hedges planted, a fence, and some other things that were obstructing the right-of-way that were cleared in the project. It was about 0.14 miles. L42 E1 to Lyons. This is the upper left photograph is pretty typical, and what you see is obviously a lot of vegetation, but almost all of it is exotic. It's almost all Brazilian peppers, Australian pines, occasional Melaleuca, and it's our policy to keep native vegetation. But this exotic chokes out everything else, and there's not a lot of native vegetation left. And these 2 photographs kind of give you an example, one, of the condition of the canal right of way before the project, but you can see the degree that it's now open so that we can maintain it in case of an emergency. Similar situation on L42 Military Canal to El Rio. If we had to do anything in an emergency to that bank on the upper left photograph, it would take us probably a half a day to a day just to get the vegetation out of the way so we could do work on the canal. Now the canals are clear. We have access to some degree on both sides, and we can, in an emergency, get to those areas and be able to perform work as needed. Similar situation on the Spanish River. It's CRP number 8, portions of L12 and L13. Here's a reach of the canal that we actually didn't do the work or have a contractor do it. The adjacent development, that's a brand new development on that upper right photograph that came in and developed a previous agricultural parcel. And in doing so, they restored the canal bank and removed any vegetation that was in the way. E2E from L42 to Clintmore. Okehele Park, and again, there we only removed Australian pines because of the limited right-of-way that we had. But those particularly can cause problems in a wind event. The root system isn't adapted very well to the high water table that we have in South Florida. So when the wind blows, those things just tip over. And we try to focus on those as an area of priority whenever we can. Here's L40, I-95 to Northwest 2nd Avenue. And again, pretty typical heavily vegetated area that needed clean. And again, back on Okehely Park. This is L7, Jog Road to Military. And again, almost all that vegetation was exotic. Similar situation on L8, L9. And you can see on the bottom right on L9, there's some pine trees, native trees that were left, and we left them there. Hopefully they'll get through this okay. This was a challenging project. This is the E1W South. It's our westernmost canal, moves water from north to south. On that upper left photograph, the before photograph, that bank on the right side of the photograph, our boundary is the boundary of the Arthur R. Marshall National Wildlife Refuge. So obviously we had to coordinate very closely with the refuge staff, one, so that we knew where the boundary was, and that two, we were very careful not to do anything that could have an environmental impact to the adjacent refuge land. And the staff, they were great. They offered recommendations on what areas to focus on, what areas that we probably wanted to be careful about, and it was very cooperative and I think successful project. Now, you might ask, how did we get over there to clean that out? And the answer is we hired a contractor. They had a barge and they floated the heavy equipment in. They'd put the debris on the barge and haul it off to where we could pick it up and put it in a dump truck. So it was a particularly challenging reach of canal, and we managed to do it without any real impact to the adjacent refuge. There's another one, the same general area. Here's E3, L5 to C51, similar situation. On this one, E1, L45 to L44, you can see in the after shot in the upper right, there's a lot of mulch. Well, we use a piece of equipment that literally grinds up the vegetation so we don't have to haul it off and move it to our landfill. That saves us a lot of money, and you know it's a better, environmentally, it's a better situation. Now, because it's exotics, you've got to come back pretty quickly and treat that area so you don't start having Brazilian pepper seedlings pop up and take over again. But that becomes a part of our additional maintenance that we pick up when we clear these areas, and we'll talk about that in a minute too. L42, E2E to Jog Road, L45, L16, L16, E3. And here's one where we had gone in, cleared the area, and now we had the opportunity to go in and do some work on the canal. So it's that bottom center photograph where now that the canal is clean, we make an assessment on the hydraulic capacity, and then if we need to, we come in and shape the banks to do two things. One, to ensure we have the hydraulic capacity, but also to assure that we have sufficient space on the canal banks to mobilize equipment to do maintenance work. Here's another post-rehabilitation area where we cleared it off, and then now we had to come back and do some work to the canal banks. And again, here's Broken Sound again, and the after photograph there in the center. We worked really closely with them. If y'all know Broken Sound, they had beautifully manicured ficus trees on the border of their property. I mean, it was part of the amenity of the development. And of course, a lot of people had concerns about, what was going to be the condition of the right of way after we removed those specimen trees. And we worked with their landscape architect, with the homeowners association, of course, a lot of residents, and what they planted back, you can see on the center bottom photograph. And of course, all of that is outside of our right-of-way now. And they're happy with it, and we're happy with it, so I'm calling that a success. Here's another photograph, same project there in Broken Sound. So as I mentioned, now that we clear these areas, particularly on the low maintenance side, and what that means, low maintenance, there's a high maintenance side, it's very wide, it gives us plenty of room to park equipment, to do work like you see in the upper right photograph. The low maintenance side is much narrower. And that was established literally back in 1915, 1920, when the district was first laid out, that configuration. And the idea was, well, you just reach across the canal if you want to do maintenance. And of course, that's an awkward situation. Back when you had farms there, it was pretty easy to do, but when you have residential development, now it becomes, potentially a hazard. So we had to create and look at new technologies to help us maintain these narrower top of bank areas. And we use a skid steer, I'll show you in a minute. We got a little spider mower, we're experimenting with that. We actually installed one of those grinder units on one of our long reach excavators so we could reach over the canal and grind material where we don't have access to travel. And of course, herbicide treatment is kind of the last resort, but we have that available as well. And here's kind of before and after, the typical stuff you see on this low bank area, low maintenance area, after we clear the trees. Obviously, grass can now grow up. We need to mow it. It's too narrow for a typical tractor. So we purchased a mower unit that we could install on a skid steer, which is fairly narrow, and we can get it in those tight areas and still continue to maintain those. On canal mowing, obviously, is a big part of what we do day to day. We've mowed 3,000 miles of canal right away, about almost 360 miles of flat mowing. We do that 4 times a year. Mowing the slopes, we do it a little less frequently. We had 485 miles, which we do 3 times a year. We renewed our annual contract for mowing services, and we don't contract everything, but we have some long, fairly open reaches like the E1, E2, E, and E2W, where we contract those services. And under contract, we mowed about 92 miles and slope mowed a little over 100. We're going to increase our contracted services in fiscal year 21 with an estimated cost of about $375,000 with 140 miles of flat mowing, 155 of slope. Our low maintenance areas are about 65 miles, and we've included some money in there for aquatic weed maintenance in southeast Boca Raton. Vegetation management is obviously a big part of what we do. We could have the canal banks and the canals in perfect condition, but if we let invasive aquatic plants take over, it can choke the water flow. So this year we treated about 4,700 acres of aquatic vegetation, and in support of our low maintenance areas that we've opened up, about 600 acres of upland vegetation. And we've continued mechanical removal of aquatic vegetation to try to reduce and supplement chemical treatment. And part of that is the use of aquatic weed booms to try to manage the aquatic weeds and trash. We currently maintain a total of 147 boom sites throughout the district. And what that does is it catches this aquatic vegetation, it kind of pins it up, and then we can sort of surgically go in there and either remove it mechanically or treat it with chemicals, but it keeps us from chasing it around up and down the canals, whichever way the wind's blowing. Associated with all this, we renewed our permit for the horticultural waste site that we use for vegetative debris removal and stockpiling. The new permit allows us to mulch the material, and it allows us to reduce testing and permit requirements because we can now chew that stuff up, sell it, haul it off, and regain capacity at the debris site. Other maintenance activities, we expanded access gate installation in the upper right. That's kind of one of our new typical gates. We've installed 33 new gates this year. We have 1,150 total gates across the district, and we're progressively replacing gate locks to reduce unauthorized access. And the ongoing dredging and canals to maintain conveyance and shoal removal is another maintenance activity. What you see when you come to the campus here is a lot of work's been done over the last 5 years. My predecessor, Bob Brown, he was really focused on improving the campus site, and you can this auditorium is an example of that. And I used to joke with him that the only thing left for me to do was to fix the old sign, Lake Worth Drainage District sign. It's in the bottom left corner. So that's my contribution to the campus improvement. But we did have a couple of projects this year. We replaced the landing deck there at the aquatic maintenance building loading dock. It was failing in some respects, and so we need to replace that. And with COVID, our field staff don't congregate as much in the break room that we have over in the shop. So we took the opportunity to refurbish that. It had a lot of termite damage and other issues. So we wanted to get that back up so that the field staff will have a nice place to be when they can get back together. Fleet maintenance is another important aspect of what we do. We maintain 70 vehicles, 22 machines or pieces of heavy equipment, 9 tractor mowers, 7 boats. And we ongoingly track and report on the quarterly usage of equipment. I won't go into detail on this except to say that the blue portion of the pie there for heavy equipment, it compares 2019 to 2020, is the machine doing actual work. The black wedge is not work, and it's when they're mobilizing, going from site to site, or when the staff is in here getting training, or they're fueling equipment, other things. And of course, the yellow and orange are when it's undergoing maintenance. And we've been tracking this for a number of years, and those numbers don't move very much, and they're very consistent with the national standard. And that's the heavy equipment slide. And when you look at mowers, it's pretty much the same situation. But we monitor our utilization just to make sure everybody's getting the maximum utilization out of each piece of equipment. With regard to right-of-way regulation, we received 421 right-of-way permit applications, which was a 12% increase from 2019. We had a little under 800 annual deliverables required for 644 individual permits. That includes fees, inspections, insurance, and we have a 93% compliance rate. We collected 100% of our annual fees, about 15,500 for service agreements, around 50,000 for permits. And then in addition to searching for permit information, our customers can now apply online for permits and pay fees online. So they can get to the information associated with their permits, and they can apply and make payments all online. We researched and responded to 6,420 Chancery Case 407 review requests, and that was a 50% increase from last year. So that's kept some of our staff pretty busy dealing with the title companies on that. We completed 488 plat and development reviews for county and municipal projects, and completed a mapping project for all permit boundaries. And that's a total of 15,500 that we've mapped. We completed digital scanning conversion project for 30,000 permit files, and reduced our record center office space by half, and of course increased response time to the public, and closed around 195 compliance matters. You can see on the bottom right all the boxes of files that were sent to scanning, and that's freed up a lot of storage space that we had allocated for files in the building. Every day somebody's doing something to the right-of-way. This is an example of right-of-way compliance, where one of our inspectors noted that the county utility were doing a test of their system, and in doing that, they washed out a major portion of the canal bank, and we contacted them, and they jumped right on it, fixed it, and did a great job. You can see on the right the restored canal bank. But that also happens with private landowners who either knowingly or unknowingly put things that, in their backyard that are actually on our right of way. And this is one of the most extreme examples. Our staff kind of referred to it as the Florida Dream, because they had a beautiful tiki hut, bar, patio, overlooking the canal. The only problem was about half of it was on our right of way. We contacted the owner and worked with them very carefully, and to their credit, they removed the portion of the tiki hut and the pavers, and they're on their property, and that opens up our property to be able to do maintenance. Here's another example on E3 north of Summit Boulevard. A nice patio deck had been constructed on our right of way, and again, the owners, to their credit, removed the obstruction, and now we have access. Here's another example where it wasn't necessarily a physical structure, but they had a parking area adjacent to their lot that they utilized that was on our right of way, and they removed the vehicles, and now we have access to that. This is probably one of the more complicated ones. You can see a red circle in the upper left photograph as a point your attention to the house, a blue house. Everything else in that photograph is on the district's right of way. And you can see at the bottom left, you can see where they had parked a Winnebago there, built a shed or small house. Our inspectors worked with them. They cleared it. The upper right-hand photograph shows what it looks like today. And now you can see there's a house back there. And again, it opened up the area so that we could traverse the right-of-way and do maintenance. We had 11 floating docks that were removed. Again, floating docks is something, it's nice in a lake. It's really a great amenity to have, but when you're in a canal and canal flows in some areas can exceed 10 feet per second, it's a recipe for a real problem. And so we don't allow floating docks. And our inspectors worked with a lot of adjacent property owners to get those removed. Public information education is really important to us. It's promoted at LWDD for community events. We did it prior to COVID-19. We continue to do it. We participated in virtual events with residential and civic groups. We've hosted the first virtual annual flood control workshop where we doubled the attendance of property managers to 120. So even after COVID, I think, we'll probably continue to have some aspect of virtual attendance so that, as many people as can make it have it available. We've had 5,000 satisfied inquiries related to field activities and public records requests. And we continue engagement on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We don't talk about it a lot in public, but employee safety is probably one of the biggest things we focus on. Administratively, we continue to focus on employee safety in the workplace. We've had no new or active workers' comp claims, which when you look at the type of equipment we operate and the environmental conditions, the steep slopes, the narrow access areas, the proximity to residents, that's quite an achievement. We have regular safety committee meetings for review of accidents and incidents, and we discuss preventive measures for those accidents. And we have ongoing safety training for employees, level 2 hazmat spill team certification. You'd be surprised how many times something or somebody goes into our canal and spills either fuel, oil, or other chemicals that we have to respond to. We had a guy at a local fast food store dump a bunch of French fry oil in the canal. I had to deal with that. Defensive driving is something we do now online, as well as our landfill or operator spotter functions. And of course, aquatic plant management, operating in accordance with the EPA's labels It's a federal law. If you're not in compliance with that, you're in big trouble. And so all of our aquatic applicators have to attend these annual conferences to get their certifications so that they are assured they're disposing of those chemicals properly. With regard to staffing, the total number of staff has not increased in more than 12 years. We have 89 positions. We've had 6 employees retire in 2020, 26 in the past 5 years. It's about a third of the workforce has retired over that period. 7 current employees are enrolled in the deferred retirement program and will be retiring within the next 5 years. We're maintaining our operational costs through organizational planning. All vacancies are reviewed for business need. We redirect those resources as the business need changes. Potential future savings are possible through staff attrition with regard to salary, benefits, insurance, etc. And consideration and use of contracted services to supplement field staff as labor requirements shift. With regard to financial highlights, the auditors issued annually an unqualified opinion for fiscal year 2019. Financial records and statements are fairly and appropriately stated in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. The board adopted fiscal year 21 budget of $16.2 million. Our non-ad valorem annual assessment is $49.50 per acre or subdivision thereof. We have $4 designated for accelerated canal rehabilitation, which I described earlier, and $3.50 for improvements in different districts' infrastructure, our major structural work that we're ongoing. We have a $42 operating budget that has not increased in 6 years. Revenues that we receive, in addition to that, we have permit fees this year around $877,000. Interest earnings around $262,000. Quick claim deeds almost $4,000. Right-of-way agreements like our tower leases around $83,000. And we solicited and awarded bids for sale of development rights within the ag reserve as a potential funding source in the future. Here's kind of a breakdown over the years of our assessment rate. The blue bars represent our operating expenses, and you can see we only raised them once there in 2014. Then on top of that, we attacked a committed, dedicated funding source portion of the assessment for the canal rehabilitation projects and our structure program. We can't spend that money on anything else, and as we finish these programs, the board will have the opportunity to look at the possibility of even reducing that assessment. Here's another view of that where you can kind of see the track of salaries, benefits, operation and maintenance costs, and capital outlay. You can see most everything is pretty flat. You can see our operation and maintenance costs go up. Again, those are because of the canal rehabilitation program and some of the structure rehabilitation that we've done. That big blue spike there in the middle of the graph, I believe, was the implementation of SCADA. So that was our big capital outlay over the last few years. Oh, sorry. Good point. SCADA, it stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. It is the computer automated system that now can control remotely our water control gate operations. It works a lot like a thermostat here in the auditorium. If it gets warm in the room, the computer turns the compressor on and it gets cooler. If it sees water getting high out there, the computer system will see it, open the gate accordingly, and when rain passes and water start falling too low, the gates close. And of course, we monitor it 24 hours a day. I can look at it on my cell phone, literally anywhere in the world, and make operational changes if we need to. It's probably been one of the biggest, most successful improvements that this agency has made, and we save a lot of water as a result because we're not over dumping to compensate for what we think we may get in regard to rainfall. Thanks, Mr. Phipps. Appreciate that. Healthcare costs. You look at the long-term trend, you know, it's been going down slowly. In recent years, it's been pretty flat, and that's quite an achievement when you look at the increase in healthcare costs around the country. Our staff has done an amazing job in managing those costs and keeping them affordable. Property casualty insurance costs, we've again, a long-term trend has been to reduce those costs. Again, it's been relatively flat in recent years. Again, it's just a testament to things our staff has been able to do to try to manage those costs. Our hazard mitigation fund, and you know, a lot of people kind of call it the rainy day fund, used to be known as our extraordinary income fund. It's around $14 million. Our goal is to have 1 year of operating expenses, with the idea that if this place ever gets hit with a Cat 5, and I want to remind you, we came real close to that last year. That Cat 5 that hit the Bahamas was only 50 miles away from us. Had it hit this district, it likely would have destroyed a lot of the equipment, buildings, not to mention the damage to the communities. And we would need probably every bit of that money to get us through a year like that. Looking ahead, we're going to complete the canal rehabilitation program. Of course, in doing that, we've got to ramp up on low maintenance canal bank maintenance program. We're going to manage existing structural encroachments on a right-of-way. That's going to be the next big job in the coming years. When you ride down our canals, once you see where the boundary is, we have a lot of encroachments. We're estimating over 3,000 structural encroachments that have been identified and mapped so far. And so we're going to have to, like in those slides previously, we're going to have to go in there and chip away at that. Ongoing capital projects for refurbishment, obviously Control 9 remediation and enhancements important. We'd like to continue to consider the development of a hydraulic analysis for the district. The last comprehensive model was completed in 1992. That was nearly 30 years ago. And so we probably should dust that off and take a look at where we go with that in the future. And of course, the sale of development rights within the Ag Reserve is a potential future funding mechanism that we'll be dealing with this year. Regional water supply issues, I didn't go into this in detail, but we talked a little bit earlier about the situation with Lake Okeechobee and the concern that operational regimes associated with the lake that are implemented by the Corps of Engineers might have implications on water supply regionally, and particularly the water that's made available to us to help manage saltwater intrusion and to have adequate supply for regional well fields. When you look at some of the changes that are happening in regard to the Everglades Restoration Plan, the operational regimes of water conservation areas in Lake Okeechobee, you come very quickly to the conclusion that there's not going to be a lot of water remaining for us to manage to deal with droughts or dry periods. And so we're going to be working with the agencies very closely on this, and we need to consider what improvements we need to make to our system to compensate for that. And in none of that I just described did I mention climate change or sea level rise, and those both are going to have impacts on what we do and how we do it. So that's going to be a bigger issue in the years to come, and I just wanted to mention that. So with that, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them.